Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our session, Breaking the News, Trends, Formats, and Journalistic Integrity. Please welcome our moderator, Content Marketing and Media Strategist at LieberComm, Cynthia Lieberman.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. Thank you, panelists, for being here. This is going to be exciting. We're going to open with a little video here to let you kind of see what the future is now. Shortly. I don't know if anyone's seen this, but artificial intelligence is here. Well, I tell you what, while they're doing that, I'll go ahead and introduce our panel since we have a brief time here. Starting here to my left is Patrice Courtaban, and Patrice is the Chief Operating Officer for TV Monde, a premium subscription service, and one of the world's largest television networks, reaching 354 million. And, one second. Next to him, we're honored to have Chris Davies, and Chris Davies comes from BBC News, which reaches 450 million people a day, and we're honored to have Chris Davies, and he will talk about his unique perspective from a global perspective. Next to him is Christian Tom, whose bio I'm pulling up here. Hold on one second. Christian comes to us with a very unique perspective from Now This Media, and he's going to talk about that in a little bit, and I'll let you explain that later. And next to him is Michael Fabiano from Associated Press, and I think we all know who they are. They are a B2B business that services over 5,000 clients, I think. And at the end is Chad Mumm from Vox Media, The Verge, Recode, Eater, Curb, very high profile, billions of viral views. So now do we have the video ready? Okay.
Got me thinking about my full-time employees and their ability to survive on $8 an hour in New York City. And foremost in all of our minds has been the loss and the grief felt by the people of Orlando. Most of us don't get our health care through the marketplace. We get it through our job or through Medicare or Medicare. And what you should know is that thanks to the Affordable Care Act, your coverage is better today than it was before. Women can get free checkups, and you can't get charged more just for being a woman. To give his employees come together to pass a common, there's a bill that would boost America's very, very hard times.
Some progress, at least within the small confines of the legal community. I think it's real important.
Here we go. President Barack Obama, when you're giving a speech, make sure you use a lot of pauses.
America's businesses have created 14.5 million new jobs over 75 straight months.
We're developing technology. Every technology can be used in some negative way, and so we all should work towards making sure that it's not going to happen. And even one of the interesting directions is that once you know how to create something, you know how to reverse engineer it. And so you can, and so one could create methods for identifying edited videos versus real videos.
So we're not in Kansas anymore, that's for sure. The future is now. And speaking of the future, this week, Facebook announced that it would begin deprioritizing news publishers and their stories with their user news feed, so that the highly engaged content will now be shared with friends and family instead. That's going to be their main focus. This photo from Outline.com claims that killing the news is the best thing that ever happened to publishers for Facebook, that killing their news. So I want to know from the panel, what do you think about this? How does this affect do you agree with this, or do you think that it's good for publishers because you'll get increased audience in a different way? Let's start with, want to go?
Sure, I'll go. I think that it's very insightful for Facebook to go down this route, because what more than likely they have looked at their data and they are seeing a trend towards a passive nature of a large group. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing this, right?
Right.
So they're seeing that in their data, and what they use is the word meaningful. And so they want you to have a meaningful interaction on Facebook. What does it mean to us from a news industry? Well, we provide wholesale information to all of our customers, and that information shows up in these articles. So, if there's more engagement around those articles, that's a good thing. But I think that what's important is, Facebook is recognizing this. I'm the kind of person who I want to see multiple opinions, and some people want to see that. Other folks want the echo chamber. But the reality is, the bigger challenge Facebook has is Snapchat. My daughters are on Snapchat nonstop, and if you take away one thing, get on Snapchat, see what they're doing. They're allowing you to save content now, which is really important. But Facebook sort of has to do this, or their future, they're going to have to figure out how they keep people hyper engaged in their content.
Michael, that's a good point, but I'd like to hear from Christian, because your platform really serves that sort of Snapchat, Instagram. Maybe you can explain a little bit about Now This News and why people, a lot of millennials have left Facebook for a lot of reasons, for good or bad for publishers. How does that help? Does this help you that Facebook is doing this, or?
Yeah, it's a good timing for this panel, given when Facebook made this announcement and the kind of tweaks to the news feed that they're working through. And I think perhaps among this panel, you're right to say, Cynthia, that Now This has the most to gain or to lose based on the changes, because Now This is not only a social first news organization, we're a social only news organization today. And so all 2.3 to 2.4 billion video views a month that Now This does come on social platforms, Facebook included. And I think the way that we have interpreted Facebook's announcement publicly, as well as conversations that they've shared with us more privately, are around the fact that perhaps meaningful connections, as Michael mentioned, is probably the key part of it. We don't necessarily see it as a reductionist view of news equals bad in Facebook's eyes. From what we can tell, the changes to the Facebook newsfeed algorithm are meant to encourage healthy dialogue around any type of content. And I think they are looking to perhaps deprioritize publishers who are creating maybe lower quality news content. But I think at Now This, one thing that our newsroom, certainly on the editorial side, I know prides itself on, is maintaining a level of journalism which you would expect from any leading news organization, including the ones here on the stage, but told for a social and millennial and mobile audience. And so for us, what's different about the Now This model perhaps is not necessarily the quality of the journalism, but perhaps more the stories that we tell, the ways that we do it, and the hooks that we use to make sure we do in fact drive the sort of engagement that we believe Facebook is looking for. So if anything, yeah, we're very optimistic about the way that the Facebook changes work for a Now This of the world, and for hopefully a lot of publishers in general. Yeah.
Well, Chris, let me ask you from a straightforward, global news, 450 million people, it's a lot of responsibility. Some think that for publishers it's good, and some think it's not good. How does this impact you on a global basis when you're with Facebook changing their distribution model?
I mean, we're not having kind of crisis talks about this, to be honest. We're going to see how it pans out. It's very new in terms of the announcement, so I don't think anyone really knows exactly what's going to happen in the long term. For our sort of the team that uploads social media content, I think, as Christian's rightly said, it's going to be about engaging content. So there may be types of content that we've posted before that we will stop posting, that we will think about before we post. Is this the kind of piece of content that's going to be shared, discussed, engaged with in a slightly different way? So it'll change our social strategy with them slightly. But, as you rightly say, we have a massive owned online platform. We've got plenty of other social media platforms that we work very closely with. So it'll be something we'll look at, but it's not something that we're, in a panic about by any means at this stage.
And I'm going to get to you in a second, but I wanted to ask you, Patrice, with the French and Facebook, you're in 12 different countries, though. So how reliant on a global perspective are they on Facebook as a publisher to help push their stories out?
Yeah, so I think the steps that Facebook is taking now, I mean, it's kind of auto-regulating maybe the sponsored content. And what we're seeing in Europe is we've started to see the government stepped in. I mean, Germany passed a law last year where social media platforms can be fined up to, I think, 50 million euros if they distribute illegal content or so-called fake news content. The French President Macron just announced, a few weeks ago that France, will be passing a law probably by the end of the year where a social media platform will have to have total transparency with regards to sponsored content. So maybe, it's interesting that Facebook is taking such steps, maybe before some regulation or other kind of regulation would come in from the government. For us, as a global brand, TV5 I think what our viewer recognize is I think has always been, the value and the high quality we try to put in our news. We're not directly involved, as some of my colleagues here, into the head news or breaking news war online. So I think I don't think it would directly or indirectly going to gain from this. We do have some viewership from the online as well, but I think in general, just for what we're discussing today, it's a very interesting some very interesting steps they're taking. Yeah.
Thank you. Chad, your business, Vox, is an explainer. You take stories. I mean, you do, of course, take headlines and report on them, but you try to explain to an audience that is used to, fast food news, but also wants more. You kind of take a different perspective. Do you think that this Facebook change is good for a publisher like you, or because you were bringing meaning to the storytelling of news and they are trying to bring relationship meaning? So what does that mean for you?
I think it's just we've seen this movie before with Google changing its search algorithm. And I think the one thing about technology is when you have this ease of distribution controlled by these powerful platform companies, people can find audiences in really efficient ways, and then there will always be people who kind of take it too far and start to game the system. And I remember when Vox was first getting started, we really wanted to be a company that was not racing to the bottom in terms of content farming and this kind of over-indexed SEO optimization. And I remember having this exact same conversation on a panel in 2012 when Google announced that it was deprioritizing these common SEO headline practices. And everybody was like, it's the apocalypse for digital media. Literally, I think I saw that same headline. The outline wasn't around then. But I think that what's different a little bit now is there's been a flood of venture capital flowing to digital media companies who have gotten addicted to the traffic and in a way that is easy for the entire industry to point to and say, look at the success that we're having here, billions of views, tons of engagement, all these comments. And so the kind of two sides of this is, one, I think that like anything, and in the history of media, publishers, content companies that have prioritized creation of high quality content, I think will be fine. And everyone on this stage does that. So I think everyone should be in a good place. And I think for us in particular, we're highly diversified. We don't just, we have 8 media brands that we publish that have, deep connections to their consumer base. And so I think, we'll be fine, continue to create great programming for Facebook, just like we continue to use best practices when we think about how we optimize for search. The same thing, we think of Facebook as a marketing channel for our programming, and I think what people hoped for is that it might become an actual programming platform where we could monetize directly on Facebook, but that was never Facebook's promise to publishers fully, and I think that news is kind of ended. The other thing for this audience is I think it points to the endurance of the television business model, for the model for premium television programming produced and sold globally, and both from an audience engagement perspective and a business model perspective. So happy to be here at NATPE.
Thank you. And Chris, you had commented about the fact that when people rely on you to bring and the same with Mike Fabiano with his business to business that Michael does, when you break something that's very big, and this would affect you too, Patrice, something that's really big, no matter what, people go to the television to get it when it's happening, when it's big. The day-to-day stuff or the pop culture is one thing, but when it's serious, maybe you could just address, you said your numbers just spike immediately.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm sure we've all been at panels and debates and conferences where we've heard, TV's dead or TV's dying or, internet's taking over. We're not seeing that at all at the BBC. The BBC News Channel is growing year on year. It's up 12% in terms of traffic. We're at a record 454 million homes around the world. We've never had access to that many homes globally. It's because people still go to the TV when a big story breaks. Now, you might see it first on your mobile phone. You might read about it briefly on the phone or check the internet. But actually, when you really want to see what's happening, the story's unfolding, what's the impact of the story on the community, on the market, on the country, then the TV is the source. And we continue to see that. And the TV still gives us that opportunity to make sure that our journalism is coming across to our audiences. And as you've seen on the clip that you just showed beforehand, being a journalist now is increasingly more difficult because you're really having to check your facts, to double check your facts. And something that we at the BBC have always done is to say, well, look, we are going to double check the facts before we publish them, whether it's on TV or online, which may mean that we're going to be a little slower than the competition. It may be that some other premium news brands will think, right, we want to get the story out first. At the BBC, it's always been about truth and quality and impartiality. So we're double checking, we're triple checking facts before we put them out. So whilst we may not be first, we know we're always going to be right.
Yeah, I mean, you had a unique situation. You're a premium channel where people pay to get TV Monde in their different countries. But obviously with the global issues that have happened, Patrice, maybe you could just address how you allowed people to have it free for a week so that everyone could come in. You became a 24/7 news bureau. I mean, that could happen to anyone regionally as well as, all of a sudden you're in Missouri and that happens. So maybe you could talk about that.
Yes, exactly. So as Chris said, our goal is not, to be the first necessarily, but really to bring to our viewers, this level of credibility and news that they're looking for. I think, we've had, 30 years in business, so we've really developed this credibility, this brand over time. And we are more, of what you would call the old school of journalism, where, you'd say, any news that you put on air, you need to verify at least from 3 sources. I'm not saying we can do that all the time, but I think that's kind of where we stand in our approach to news. So yes, what's interesting is that, even though we're not a 24/7 news media, we do have a significant portion of news. We produce about 6 hours of news a day. And we have this ability to really transform very quickly into a 24/7 news channel, depending on what's happening in the world. And unfortunately, over the last few years, there's been enough, tragic events in the world where, we had to be a news channel for 24, 48 hours. I mean, especially, when things happen in Paris or in Europe, we have people, tuning in around the world because they want to know what's happening. And also, I think, one point of differentiation, as Chris said, when there's something like this happening, people tune in to the big screen because I think the big screen has still a certain level of credibility that maybe, you can't carry online all the time, And, I just think the concept of breaking news, has reached a level of absurdity today. What is breaking news? It's.
So I was doing a project with UCLA, and they had a shooting, and KTLA News, the people on the campus were not getting their news quick enough through the Bruin Online Alert or whatever it was, and they actually went to the KTLA Facebook Live to get the news. So they were getting broadcasting, but they were getting it through social media. And, it used to be, I saw the headline, but I didn't read the story. And now it's, I saw the photo, but I didn't read the headline. And the power of visual continues to be a huge driving force for anyone. And we have to be more flexible. And so the most flexible manner possible requires traditional and not so traditional methods. So I'm going to start with Chad at the end about how do you keep your brand trust? How do you do 24/7? How do you staff somebody to do the kind of news that you and, well, all of you, but we'll start with you.
Yeah, we hire in video space, we really hire creators that produce, write, shoot, edit, and then also do graphics. And we have a big kind of visual culture at Vox, and particularly around our news brand, Vox.com. We have a style guide and aesthetic, and then we've created tools for producers to learn. And it's amazing. You can train a writer or a producer or someone who's an experienced editor to learn After Effects and do animation. And so we've really tried to create a visual language for our storytelling. And yes, sometimes the visual is more powerful and can be more effective. We've seen the most shared piece of content that our company, Vox Media, has ever produced is a 9-minute explainer on the Syrian war, which I think is pretty awesome in a company that has like a giant sports network and a tech network and all this great. People really shared. I think it was shared like 80 million times. And
Amazing.
And so that I think speaks to the depth and quality. And there was, it was narrated, but there was no physical. Nothing was shot physically. It was narration over animation over a map, basically. But the explanation was so satisfying for viewers, and it took 9 minutes to get to, but it was so satisfying that people felt compelled to share it. And I think that speaks to the power of a visual culture and what we've been able to build.
Well, that takes a little more time to produce a nine-minute piece, which is valuable. Don't get me wrong, 80 million shares, obviously. But then when it comes to now this news, and you've got to flip it over, and you have to find the talent to be able to do the writing, producing, adapting to different content. Why don't you talk about that, Christian, and Now This?
Yeah, the Now This newsroom is a loud, fast-paced newsroom for the 21st century, and it's a diverse newsroom. It's a place where you'll hear people shouting across the room to get their story approvals. It's a lot of sourcing from social, leaning on a lot of our best practices around what types of content do drive engagement with an audience. The number one thing that we look for is an engagement rate. We don't really typically measure things like completion rates, which otherwise might probably have like a larger kind of ranking on a metrics page. For us, we really look at social engagement. We look at the idea of someone wanting to comment or like or share or tag their friend in a video to be a positive signal of content that we know we've made, but also because, as we talked about earlier, Facebook we know prioritizes that as a signal in terms of it appearing higher in like a mutual friends feed. So when we think about creating social content, that's at the forefront of what we do. And we've started to build different verticals. There are now 12 different single topic channels for Now This, which live across the social sphere. Everything from our main Now This news page or channel to Now This entertainment, Now This future. We've launched 2 channels actually recently in concert with brands. So we recently launched Now This Money with Chase and Now This Food with Campbell's Soup Company. So we're thinking about ways to find like-minded advertising partners and still find, at the end of the day, a topic that we know our audience cares about. And it requires, you're right, Cynthia, very much a very detailed process by which we know stories can get approved in the same way that any news organization has. The difference is we're building things for short form, highly visual, social distribution and social only. That's the name of the game for the Now This kind of mindset.
But Chris and Michael, so that you have a different responsibility. You're reaching such a large audience, and you might take a little bit more time. Well, you have to serve on you're distributing B2B, whereas you're serving the whole world on what's going on. How do you create content that's flexible and releasable and credible in the time constraints of a 24/7 news cycle?
Well, we have a sort of a global hub in London, as I'm sure everyone will know. There's journalists from all around the world based there, and there's 30-odd languages that come out of that building. On top of that, we also have bureaus around the rest of the world as well, so we kind of have a follow-the-sun mentality. I mean, the London office is 24/7, but maybe that the Washington bureau is picking up a story, maybe the Delhi bureau is picking up a story, depending on when it's breaking and which kind of group is closest to it. And then one example, it's an old one, but it's a really good one. I mean, that I always remember is that we have journalists all over the world in all major markets. And there was an instance in Kenya where there was an attack in a mall, a terrorist attack, And actually, we had a journalist who could get to that incident within about 10 minutes because we have journalists everywhere. And so she was able to get there. She was literally flak jacket, helmet on, reporting gunshots going on behind her. The rest of, our direct competitors were scrambling to try and get someone out there. They were reporting from London. There was someone on the phone who was kind of miles away. And I think it's just a really important fact for us. We have journalists in all markets, which means we can cover truly global stories.
Yeah, you definitely have that reach, which a lot of people in the U.S., some of you who are local broadcasters, have a different challenge because you're reliant on factual materials coming from you or from Patrice or from you, Michael. And I know that data mining is important and automation. You have a great automation process that you tap into, which people are skeptical of, but it can actually be very useful. Maybe you could just talk about how you take these stories when you've got to just go out there and get it and be accurate. How do you do that, and how do you have a brand trust? Audiences don't even necessarily know that you are doing that, because I think both of you do that.
Well, I'll speak to the AP side. I mean, we're 172 years old, and we are still very relevant and still focused on the core, which is quality journalism. So our job is to make sure that Chris has that journalism, and AP is a breaking news organization. So we're trying to get Chris and all of our customers globally that information. And of course, we will evolve the story and expand on the story, but quality is still number one at the AP. I mean, there's no room for any sort of fabrication or anything like that. It's not tolerated. And we are a global organization, and so again, the quality is at the core. So 24/7, we've always been 24/7, but the demand is just so high for news content. And what really is our mutual challenge here is we want to release information that's accurate. Mm-hmm. And so there is this desire to get that information out there as fast as possible as the story continues to develop and people are waiting for the next piece of the story. And it's this acceleration of knowledge and thought and content that's going on, but we have the responsibility to sort of balance that.
So how do you use automation for that?
So there's two big things going on for us right now. The first is making sure that when we do send packages, our stories out, they're full multimedia. So that's full text, images, video, a social tag, a summary. So sending as many of those out with as many elements as possible is really important. And then making that content flexible. Because what's happening in the media industry is, for all of our customers, is massive consolidation. So the newspapers are all getting together, and you got one big newspaper customer with 100 papers, and then you got one big TV station group with 50 to 100 TV stations. Everybody wants centralized publishing. They want to be able to hit the enter key and deploy that content everywhere. As fast as possible. So we're just focused technically making those packages as flexible as possible.
Thank you. I want to take just a slight diversion here. There was a Facebook Watch panel. I don't know if anybody saw that earlier today, but publishers are now becoming content providers of streaming content, which is beyond media, which Vox has the ability to do. And you just announced a new show, didn't you? It's a news program. So
yeah, we haven't announced where it's going, but we're going to be bringing our news explainers to television in a major way, and I was hoping to be able to talk about it at the panel, but that announcement hasn't come out yet this week.
I thought I saw it on that. I only brought it up because I thought I saw it.
But it is exciting
because I only read
because
the headline. I didn't read the story, I guess.
Well, maybe it happened while we were sitting up here. But anyway, I think what's really exciting is we've seen, and again, like I talk about, we're here in NATPE, and I think proves the endurance of the television business model, and we are really excited to take our really visual approach to journalism and explaining, helping people understand the world, contextualize it in a way that's accessible and fun. We're going to be bringing that to television and with a very global scope. And what I think is exciting about a show that relies on a meta explanation that is satisfying for viewers is it's easily translates into different languages. It travels really well. We've seen that with social, and we expect to see that the same way with our television series. And I run the television group for Vox Media, so we're going to be looking to expand across all of our categories. And the onus is we want to help redefine every category where we publish, whether that's lifestyle or news or sports or technology. We want to redefine what TV can look like in that category, and we think modern audiences are demanding premium, amazing, high-quality television, and we think we can be both a great platform digitally, but also a great provider of that content to the best distributors in the world.
Thank you. Since we're getting close to the end here, I wanted to get takeaways from everyone, but particularly, I am very concerned about critical thinking and fake news, as you all are. I'm on the board of directors of the National Association of Media Literacy for Education. What's that? Well, now that fake news is, we know what that means. And audiences and readers are more skeptical than they've ever been. So how can people in our audience, from your experience, protect their brand trust? You have staff, you have fact checkers, you have automation, you have a lot of tools available to you. There's user-generated content and citizen journalism and political figures and alternate facts. So how do you, each of you, if you could just give a little takeaway here, how you protect your brand trust? All of you are very credible and there's a reason for it. How can they do it even with minimal tools? What are the first steps?
Well, I think what's interesting is that while we have the proliferation of the fake news and online content, I think we're also in a phase where there's a renaissance for brands, and especially news brands. I think there's a large number of people out there who are even willing to pay to get reliable news sources, and that's why you're seeing brands like Wall Street Journal, New York Times growing, and I think there's still a very strong play for news brands, and I think to achieve that, you need to know what you stand for and what are, the value behind your brands. For us, TV5 Monde, we stand as a premium content network and would say a cultural, network, but, we don't, what we mean by cultural, it's not just, independent cinema and classical music. Cultural to us, it's really about offering to our viewers a broader understanding of the way of life, society, and of course, news is part in establishing this understanding. So yeah, we're very positive about the future. Whether online, we still think there's a big play on the big screen, and established and new brands will have some growth.
Yeah, how do you deal with this on a 450 million subscriber base, so to speak?
I mean, Patrice is absolutely right. I think, you go back to your core brand values, and for us at the BBC, it is about trust and impartiality. As you rightly said, I think trust in the media is low at the moment, and I think that's a lot of that is down to the fact that people don't want to be force-fed an opinion, they don't want to be told what to think, they don't want to be led in a particular direction. So I think it's a great opportunity for us right now at the BBC, because we sit right there in the middle, we are impartial, we expect to give you the facts, and then we let you make up your own mind. And I think that at a time like this, where audiences need to be able to trust a news source, they need to be able to go somewhere where they know that the facts are verified and checked. That is an incredibly important service that we provide. And we've started up a new team called Reality Check in the BBC. They'll take a story, they'll say, this group of people said this group of people said that, we will help you to try and make sense of it. So what are the facts on this side of the argument? What are the facts on this side of the argument? Put that forward, and then that's for you as the audience to decide. And I think that's a really good opportunity for us right now. It's a space that's opening up.
And it's a good role model to follow. And you have a different channel. Thank you, Chris. You have a different type of fast food, instant. It's not, fast food doesn't mean that it's necessarily not nutritious, but you have a different perspective in the way you serve your audience. So how do you make sure that they know that what you're doing is right, and how can people take that away?
Yeah, I suppose in my mind there's a distinction between an organization that doesn't ferry in fact-based news and an organization like Now This, which takes a point of view. And I think this millennial consumer base sometimes actually is looking for someone to provide a point of view and to own it, and to be accountable to the facts. And I think that's probably getting to the answer to your question, accountable to the facts, number one, but really, really important to also own a perspective and to speak to the audience that you've curated. And I'll give you an example from a channel of ours which is kind of, I suppose, on the smaller scale of where Now This is in terms of video views. But it's called Now This Weed. Now This Weed is one of the 12 verticals for Now This, and it's exactly what you'd think it's about. It's all about cannabis. And it was started, I'll say, based off of a data insight. Now This is very much a journalism company, but it's also a really data-driven news organization. And when we were ranking kind of a monthly content audit of some of the top videos from the main Now This news page, when it was one of the only ones we had, we would kind of provide some meta tags around what was common about the top videos in terms of engagement, views, et cetera. And cannabis became one of them. But it wasn't really just like a high times, stoner culture kind of weed content. A lot of the videos hit upon the core themes of what the Now This audience cares about. And it did take a point of view. It was about social justice or incarceration rates, and all centering in that case around weed or cannabis or marijuana law. And we have a long-term view around cannabis and kind of the growth in the United States and more globally around legalization, et cetera. But Now This Weed was grown as a page, actually distinctly so that people who really want to learn more about that topic from a Now This perspective can get that. So I suppose I think about that as nothing wrong from where I sit of having a point of view and knowing who you are, but absolutely do all of the Now This Weed videos have proper fact-checking and fact-based reporting? You betcha.
I have a kind of a direct question for you. Thank you, Michael. Weed this, okay. I have a direct question for you, and that is when you have to break news, you know, a tweet can kill 6 months. You guys have this problem too. One tweet can kill 6 months of preparation for journalism, like when you did that 9-minute piece. What do you do about the fact that you know you're producing something credible and somebody else is erroneously negating it to meet their own agenda? How do you address that? And how can local broadcasters or other broadcasters out here learn from that, from what you do when you get in a situation like that?
Well, I mean, we do tweet at AP, but it's usually after we've released content. So it's usually a little bit more delayed, which is fine. I mean, I think that what we've done is we have a partnership with Facebook, and if you're not aware of it, we actually have a fake news feed and a not real news feed. So we've actually created tools for our customers, for the entire media industry to access. And so what we do with Facebook is they've graciously built a dashboard for us, and we actually decide what stories we're going to go debunk. So you've got the fake news wire that comes out every day, and then we've got a not real news wire, which is basically, it's something never happened. So there was never a bear at NATPE. That news really didn't happen. So we're trying to provide the tools to the industry, and I would say to answer the question that we just continually have to be on the front lines, pushing out information about something that didn't happen or was erroneous. And it's really about being vigilant. And I think if you're in a newsroom, it's your standards and practices team. You have to have a great standards team and a really well-trained editorial staff and rights and clearances. NBC News has a 15-person rights and clearances team because they are clearing content 24/7. I mean, we are operating similarly. And so the way you protect yourself is not only watching for these stories, but also protecting your intellectual property and making sure that any IP that you're using, has the right disposition and can be, is it approved for one use or is it approved globally in perpetuity? So having people that understand that and know that is really important no matter what content you're producing.
Is that automation, is the Facebook fake news and those two programs, is that B2B only if you were an AP client that you get that, or is that available to the consumer?
It's available for AP customers.
Okay, thank you, that's interesting. And, when you're talking about how, I'll let you respond to that, but what do you do, because you are producing things that are a little bit more explainer, so there's some different perspectives on that, sometimes even editorial opinion driven. How do you deal with that?
Can I just say the fact that the AP has a fake news feed is like a Black Mirror episode? Literally like alternate universe AP, like all fake stories. It's wild. I think I work on the business side of our company, and so I think that if you want a really satisfying answer to that question, you have to talk to our editorial teams. But we do obviously uphold extremely high standards, and we own mistakes. Like, I think everyone makes mistakes, and we try to own them. I think our opinion, we also publish opinion, like any kind of news organization. We try to make it clear when something is an opinion piece versus sort of a news explainer. And in order to have I think a satisfying explanation, you need to help people understand all sides of the argument. So in general, our kind of core explainer product tends to present multiple perspectives on an issue in order to help the viewer, reach what we would say is sort of a satisfying explanation of the issue at hand. We also write editorial around it. So, you may have an explainer that is very kind of meta and helps you understand it. And then there may be an editorial opinion, article written by one of our editors that directly takes a position that's strong, but we really try and distinguish between the kind of core product that is our explanatory journalism and then, obviously our editorializing. And again, everybody makes mistakes, so I think the challenge is owning those mistakes quickly, issuing corrections, and being upfront with our audience that we're doing the best we can.
Thank you. I think that basically what we can gather from this panel is that there's a wide purview for people to critically think about the news by not just going from one perspective, but you're still going to go to where you feel the most comfortable. In the end, you're going to go to TV when something really important happens, which is good news for the NATPE audience and for broadcasters. My one question that I did have, though, is about user-generated content and rights issues, because the user can be very helpful to a broadcaster or anyone. They can deliver stuff, but how do you fact-check that? How do you clear that? Any one of you can answer. It doesn't. I just wanted to be sure to address that before the end of the panel. Who wants to go for it?
We have a tool called social asset management, but this is a really hard topic for us because we want to only release stuff that's been verified. So in a breaking news situation, user-generated content can be extremely helpful if we can verify it. And the challenge we have at AP when releasing user-generated content is the asset verification process. It could be very lengthy. And when we put something out that's user-generated, it's got to be fact-checked and all that. So we've found the feeds rather small right now because the content we get in, we've got some really sharp journalists who have looked at images. A great example that we talked about preparing for this was an image that came in from the Middle East that had a statue in the image, and the statue had been, blown up a few weeks earlier, and it was still in this image. So it was a fake photo that somebody had sent in. So you've got to have
literally blown up, not like the photo, literally destroyed.
It was blown up. It was bombed. The area had been bombed. So folks that have a keen eye for that. Chris has a global journalist force, as do we, and so you got folks all over the world that are looking for those things. But we receive a lot of that kinds of content, and we just can't verify it. We don't put it out. So it's tough. It's great in breaking news, but tough to sort of memorialize that content if we can't verify it.
All right. Well, is there anything anybody else would like to add? I want to thank you so much for bringing your perspective. It's nice to see a wide variety of the way that news is being transmitted in a very, very ever-evolving, changing news landscape.
Well, I mean, maybe one more thought. I think, the only fact that, I don't think, well, as media brands, it's still a discussion we're going to have for some time, how to address and serve our viewers. But I think one of the things that has really changed is, this discussion we're having now about this notion of fake news. I mean, it's probably, one of the things the government has helped, to bring this discussion because, frankly, a lot of news, that we see in America are, closer to entertainment. And I think, the only fact that we can have this discussion today and maybe, to be continued, help us to ultimately, better serve, the viewers and the consumers.
Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for coming. Thank you all of you for coming and caring about this subject and wanting to learn more about it to hopefully serve the world in a better way when it comes to distributing information to the world. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the conference.